like life is very limited. The only thing that's really limited in life is time. And you want to make sure that you're actually maximizing that time as much as you possibly can, because maybe later in life, maybe you don't have the energy, or maybe your family's there, or maybe something else is there, and you don't really know where you want to go. But the earlier you figure out, the easier it's going to be to really maximize your life and give yourself everything that you want.
My name is Django. I grew up in a small town, but always felt the universe pushing me to do something monumental. In 2010, I was working at the drive-thru of McDonald's for $7.25 an hour. Fast forward to today, and I'm the co-founder of a multi-million-dollar technology agency. This is the Django Show, where I interview founders of successful companies and expose the how-tos of becoming a successful entrepreneur. What up, what up? It's your boy Django, host of the Django Show, and I am here with my brother Frankie. We actually ran into some technical difficulties earlier on, so I wanted to make sure that I gave him a proper introduction. He is the founder of Breadcrumbs, and his wisdom is honestly beyond his years. The challenge that he's taking on with his company and what his beliefs are in regards to career and really being able to empower yourself is just absolutely incredible. And I'm so excited to jump into this podcast. If you are thinking about changing careers, if you are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, if you just want to get a little bit of wisdom, this is going to be the episode for you. So without further ado, another episode of the Django Show. Well, all right. Well, we'll start right from the beginning. So, obviously, for you, you have your company that you started. Super excited to even be watching you do it on Instagram and just everything you've been doing. So, it'd be great if you kind of started from the beginning on just like your journey and how you kind of got here, starting your own company.
Yeah. So, just to give you a little background, so originally from Baltimore, Maryland. Went out to school to LA. I went to USC in Southern California, where I studied chemical engineering. I thought it was what I wanted to do. I really wanted to work in the oil industry at the time, which was like, now looking back at it, people were just like, why would you do that? But I wanted to work in the oil industry. I think I was very misguided at that point, where the only thing that I really cared about at that time was how much money can I make right out of college. I was very short-sighted, right? I was like, right at that time, petroleum engineering was the hot thing, right? You can make like $160,000, $170,000 out of college. And so that was my whole focus, with focusing on chemical engineering. And so towards maybe my sophomore or junior year, the oil market crashed. And so that kind of messed everything up. And so I worked at Procter and Gamble as a process engineer. And then I worked at Keurig Dr. Pepper as a production supervisor. And during that time, honestly, maybe 2 weeks into working at Procter and Gamble, I knew that was not it. Like, I just I was like 2 weeks in. No, honestly, you know what it was? It was, I got paid on a monthly basis. I got my first paycheck and I felt nothing. Like, I was like super excited, and I was like, yeah, like we get paid once a month, and like Friday you'll get paid for your first time. And I was super excited because I was like, that was what I worked for, was like to getting a paycheck, right? So the first time I got a paycheck, I checked my bank account, I saw the money there, and I was like, "This is fucking stupid." And I was just like, "This is like," I was like, "Dude, I thought I would feel something so much more," and it kind of sent me down the spiral of like questioning. This was like the first big moment in my life where I was questioning, like, was everything I was told like kind of a lie to some extent? Where I was like, "This is kind of weird." And so I really, that kind of threw me off a little bit, and I was just like, "Well, what am I going to do? Where do I want to go with this?" And so first big thing that I did was I moved back to California, because I knew that I wanted to be back in California, because I was in West Virginia at the time. So that was just like, no. Yeah. And so in the process of working Keurig Dr. Pepper, at this point, I understood that I wanted to do something different. No idea still. I thought consulting was my path forward. So I looked at consulting and was very I thought consulting was everything. Like, I was like, this is my next 5-year plan. This is what I'm going to do. And so in 2018, I applied to this consulting firm called Boston Consulting Group. I really wanted to work there. I thought it was going to be amazing. Didn't work out. So I wasn't super upset, because I just had started preparing for it. The next year, that's when I was like, I'm definitely getting this job in 2019. I was like 100% bought in. I'd already started planning about after. So what they usually do is you work there for like 2 years, then you go back to grad school, and then you continue working after that. So I already had in my mind, like, 5-year plan was work here for 2 years, go to Stanford, go get my MBA, and then return. That was my goal. And so basically they just didn't pan out. It just did not go the way I wanted. I remember getting the rejection letter. And I was just crushed. Like, I was just completely crushed. Like, imagine having a full game plan that you fully believe in. Like, you're like, people ask you, what are you planning on doing? You're like, you have this in your head, or it's like almost like memorized You're like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And so that disappeared in a matter of just like seconds, right? Like that day I called out of work. I was crushed. Like I couldn't do anything. And so I called out of work. I sat at home, basically stared at the four walls of my room all day. And then the week after, I went on this journey where I was just like, well, what am I going to do? Let's find the way to figure this out. Because I had no idea. I was like, what do I really care about? What do I really want to do? What do I like? What do I want to discover for myself? What do I want to do for the world? Because I've always saw myself as someone that was going to change the world in some way, or this is an aspiration of mine. And so one of the things I was like, well, what do I really like to do? Like, what do I like to do? And so in that process, I really realized that, I really like helping people. And that's like a very cliche thing to say, but like I love helping people, and I've always really been attached to like how best to optimize your life was something that I always really cared a lot about, which is like what is going to reap the most happiness? What is going to make you the happiest? What is going to make your life the most enjoyable? How are you going to die and be like, I have zero regrets? Like I literally think I've maximized life up into, right. And so in that process, I really realized that there wasn't really a business out there that focused on helping people really figure out what they wanted to do. That was like the big thing. There was nothing out there that really helped people realize like if there was something out. Well, there's two things really. There's nothing out there to help people really understand what was out there and really discover things and really research the different topics out there. And then on top of that, there was no company that really helped you go and get it. Like there's not really, LinkedIn helps you get a job, but it doesn't like if you're a software engineer and you want to go be a comedian, like it's not going to tell you how to do X, Y, and Z, or like something more structured. If you're a chemical engineer and you want to go be a product manager, it doesn't tell you how to go from X to the other thing. It's just not. It doesn't explain those things to you. So I realized there was a huge hole in the market in the sense of like there's nothing that helps you really transition from point A to point B. And so in that process, I realized that was one of the things I really wanted to focus in on was how do you actually go and really discover and transition? Like there's multiple things there. And so that's really what Breadcrumbs focus in on, right? So we're basically a social network that really helps young professionals at this moment really figure out what is out there in the world, help them explore, help them research what is out there and figure out what they want to do, and then help them connect to the best path forward. How do you actually go from point A to point C or whatever, what you're trying to do? And I think that's super important in the process is just kind of really figuring out, where to go with your life and what you want to do, right? Like life is very limited. The only thing that's really limited in life is time. And you want to make sure that you're actually maximizing that time as much as you possibly can, because maybe later in life, maybe you don't have the energy, or maybe your family's there, or maybe something else is there and you don't really know where you want to go. But the earlier you figure out, the easier it's going to be to really maximize your life and give yourself everything that you want. Does that make sense? That was a really long-winded answer, but that's really, really what we're doing. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an amazing thing. I mean, for me, I was doing technology sales for Salesforce and a bunch of companies. And as I was trying to, find something that meant anything, same thing happened to me. I got my biggest paycheck off a deal that happened. It was my first like 5-figure paycheck. And then it was just kind of like, I don't know, like there was a moment of happiness, wow, that this is the bank account. But then like how long can your bank account, or how long can you, whatever, if you pay off something or buy something, it didn't mean anything. And so I remember that beginning of my journey of trying to figure out how to build an app, because that was what my goal was. And I just Googled it. I was like, how do you build a mobile app? And then I was just trying to follow step by step by step. But at the end of the day, I mean, it took 3 years before I really got any kind of ground on really being able to start my own company. That was in part because I didn't know who to reach out to or who to trust, because I did talk to people and some of them asked for money. Some of them said they could do it. Some of them said this. Is like, you just really don't know who to trust when you're actually trying to go through the process of doing something you've never done.
100%. I think, yeah.
One of the things that I think is really interesting is once you hit the point of realizing that you didn't want to necessarily stay in the job that you were in anymore, you actually kind of went about things different than I did. I immediately quit. I was like, I want to quit. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I made some money with my buddy and I quit my job. And that was it. I didn't look back. Now, that created a need because I didn't have any money saved. But, you hear a lot of people say you should have at least 6 months saved. And I know that you went even farther than that. And so it'd be cool to kind of tell people, especially as they're at the beginning of their journey, what made you do that and how you went about that process.
Well, first things first, I respect you for just doing it. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think not enough, like, don't get me wrong, I think it's always good to think before you do, but I think not enough people do things of like high like courageous thing. So I respect that, right? You realize that was not what you're going to do, and you immediately changed. And I think that's really true. Like that's really good in the sense of like be true to your nature. Like don't live a lie. I think a lot of people live lies.
Yeah,
But
I
for
agree.
me, what I knew that when I started curing Dr. Pepper, that was in 2019. I started the job knowing that I was going to leave in 2 years. I was going to be
Mhm,
there at max 2 years. If there's something in
mhm,
between, that was fine. At some point, I think I committed to staying there for 2 years because I was like looking for jobs constantly, and I was like, at some point, you kind of you pick this, ride it out for 2 years.
mhm,
Use your and like the reason why I committed to that, and I'll get to the money point is the reason why I committed to it is because I was wasting time doing other things, like trying to find other avenues, right? So I was applying to jobs, like any lead that came my way in the sense of like, oh, this job sounds cool, I want to leave. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, right? But I
mhm,
realized very quickly that like chasing all these leads was wasting my time when I could be like, I accept that I'm going to be here for 2 years. Let's start planning what you're just going to do next instead of trying to figure out what's the quickest way to get out of here. Instead of thinking short term, think long term, right? So you pick something it sucks. Sometimes you just got to suck it up, and that's kind of what I did. I just knew that in 2 years, no matter what, I'm quitting,
mhm.
and that either means that I'm going to quit and just not have a job, or I'm going to have a job, or I'm going to start my own business. Is one of those three things. That's what I'm going to do. So in that process of just accepting that, because at the beginning of 2019, I tried to start another business. Um, so I knew that I had some good ideas. I just knew that I was going to do it in 2 years, and I planned for it. So I changed like my 401k plan. At one point, I was saving more than like what they would really return to you, and I
Mhm,
bumped that down to just the minimum, that making sure that I would get as much money as possible from the company. Everything
mhm,
else, I was like pretty much saving 50% of my income, and
mhm,
that was even living in LA, I was still saving a ton of money. And so I just planned, right? Instead of the 6 month plan, I just knew that whatever window I can give myself as much as possible, because I knew that this was going to be my first business that I'm starting, that it's
mhm,
going to take longer than what normally people use. So I was like, I'm going to
mhm,
just save as much money as I possibly can save. And at
mhm,
the time, I had saved about for a year,
mhm,
and luckily, my parents had bought a place out in the LA area, so I moved in with them, so that basically extended my window by 2 years. So basically, I have about money about for 2 years. And don't get
mhm.
me wrong, I'm definitely living like on the fringe by all means. Like I'll give you the number. I basically have like $30,000 saved up
Mhm.
ultimately. I put 10 into my business. Um, but that was pretty much what I needed. That's what I saved up for myself, and that's what I'm going to live off of for the next 2 years is my game plan. Just because I knew that I wanted to quit, and I was like, and I also wanted to make sure that I had the freedom to quit. Right, like one of the big things about why people don't quit is because they need the money. So
Yeah.
if you have the money, then like, what's really stopping you from quitting besides your own fears, right? And so luckily, I had broken those like over the 2 years. I'd broken those fears at that point. I was like, the, I was more fearful of wasting my time than
Mhm.
being like, "Oh, if I end up broke," because like, I have an uncle who's just very, like, logical, and he was like, "What do you have to be afraid of?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, if I run out of money, Imma have to move home," and he's like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, that's a kind of a good point, like, you don't really like, don't get me wrong, I will admit that I am privileged in the fact that I can move home, and my parents don't really charge me anything, by all means, take that into account.
Yeah.
But, like, take advantage of that situation, right? Like, that was a very lucky thing that I had, right? Like, I could quit, I could run out of money. And the
Yeah.
worst that's happen is, like, I already live with my parents. So the worst thing that can really happen to me is I just stay there and go get another job. Like, the worst thing really is I go get a job.
Right.
That to me is, like, that's bad. Like, moving home is not bad. Go getting a
Yeah.
job and working for someone else is bad in my mind. So, yeah.
I agree. My that was what my co-founder said to me when he asked me like how much money do I need to make per month to basically take out the income that I was making at my job. And it was like $5,000. And he was like, okay, so if we made $5,000, you quit your job? I was like, yeah. And then the next week we made $5,000 on this deal. And he was like, so what's up? And I was like, okay, like, yeah, I guess. And so then it was like, and then he just was like, well, what's the worst case that happens? Like, if you quit your job and then, we keep making this money and then what? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I got to go back to my job. And he's like, yeah, like, do you think you can get another job? I'm like, I mean, yeah, I guess. He's like, well, you're like, what? but in your head, it's like this whole thing. And honestly, the anxiety and like almost just like the worry and fear of what's you don't understand is the worst part of it at the end of the day. No matter how you try to spin it, that always ends up being the worst part of it. It's never as bad as it is in your head.
100%.
Anything really.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
I
you
was
go.
gonna say basically that was one thing that I really came to the conclusion of was like two things really. It was like one, the fear of failure. The fear of failure you have to kind of get rid of to some extent, but the fear that was bigger in my head was the fear of not reaching my potential and not using my time wisely. Like I always tell people, I think it's kind of ingrained. People that grow up like poor or impoverished or in any way, in some shape or form like that, they think of everything in terms of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the privilege that people that grow up with money is they think in time. They think of in windows of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because time is the ultimate resource, not money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the one thing that I was always thinking about. I was like, if I look back in time and realize that you can't go back.
Right.
What would be more concerning, being broke or realizing that you didn't do something that you wanted to do? And
Yeah.
not doing what I wanted to do was way more impactful and like
Mm-hmm.
way more just like, wow, that would really, really suck. That would waste my 20s, which is like, not going to say the most important, but like it sets you up for the rest of your life. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to use that time wisely, then like that is all, you can't go back.
Yeah,
So
I
that
agree.
was like a big
The,
thing for me.
the thing that's interesting though is the fear of failure. I feel like is weirdly ingrained in us at school. I mean, luckily for me, when I was in college, I had a professor who really pushed me on like kind of pushing myself to the edge and not being afraid to fail. But he was the only one. I mean, if you think about it, the whole idea of school is by any means don't fail. Like
100%.
you cannot. It's only about success. And the people who literally never fail are the valedictorians. And if you don't get into like the top college, then this. And so like if you think about it from 0 to 22, you're constantly in this fear of like, well, I don't want to be like the idiots. I don't want to be like the failures. And in a way for me, that was actually, I started to kind of realize that that was a problem that I had. The fear of failure almost came from this, from 22 years of doing everything I could to not fail. And in some cases, like choosing the easier route so that I wouldn't fail. I remember I had like a AP class I could have taken. And I was like, well, I mean, at the end of the day, if I take this AP class and don't get a good grade, well, like I could have just taken the regular class and had a good grade and my GPA solid. So I chose the easier route a few times. And so it's like in a weird way, as a culture at least, and I'm seeing it change a little bit more now, though. It's like you would rather take the easy A than to take on the
100%.
hard thing. So I can understand why it's so hard for people to jump outside of that gate.
I think, and that's kind of one thing that we really trying to want to teach people through Breadcrumbs, right? Is like you got to try new things. I think that's one of the big and
Right.
it's weird to say this, but like a lot of science has just been discovered by guess and test. Like pretty much like all science, right? It's just like you try something, it doesn't work. You try something else, it doesn't work. You just continue it. Like, don't get me wrong, you have to be focused in your intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of time is just spent by guessing and testing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's literally it. And so to some extent, right, like if you think about all the great succeed, like the very successful people in life, they've
Mm-hmm.
basically only, not want to say they only succeeded once, but they only really had to hit gold like one time. But you don't talk about how many times they failed, right? Like Bill Gates had started a business before Microsoft that went bankrupt. And no
Right.
one even knows that, right? Because like no one cares, right? Like no one really cares that he failed, right? And so it's super important that you go through life. And I do this sometimes too, is like I stop myself and I'm just like, and then I always catch myself like, well, what's the worst that happens, right? Like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like you just continue, you learn and you move on from it. Because one of the big things they teach you about being an entrepreneur, or like they always tell you about being an entrepreneur, is it's better to make a decision and know that's the wrong one. I make a decision and figure out the wrong one, then keep preparing yourself to make the right one, and then making the wrong one like 10 years down, like 5 years down the road. So you might as well just go figure out real quick that it's not the right one, and then move on to the next thing. And so that's kind of like a big thing that we do at Breadcrumbs is we try and narrow down what the options are. We're not going to give you like one big option and say this is the right one for you, because you can't really do that, right? Life is about
Right.
guesses and bets, right? Like you want to increase your chances as much as possible to guess correctly. But it's still a guess to some extent, right? Like it still might be wrong. You're just trying to give yourself the best odds. And so once you go do that, once you narrow down your focus and you have a couple options, you go and test them, right? You test the first one and say, is this something I really enjoy? And go do it, right? Like you can very quickly, the best way to know if something you don't like is go try it, right? Like with food, You know, it might look weird, it might be new to you, but the first way to test it is go just try it. If you like it, you found something you like. If you
Yeah.
don't do it again. Simple as that. But the only way you know is by going and trying it. And so one of the big things we focus on is like, let's rapidly try new things. And as soon as you figure out it's not, we'll move on to the next thing. We'll try the next thing. But the thing is, when I realized that when working with a lot of different people, it's like analysis by paralysis. And a lot of people are like, there's a couple options they have, like they'll have like 3, 4 options, and they don't know which one to choose. And it's kind of a couple things, which is like, one, they have no way to weight the system. Like they don't know how to weigh which one is the best option. How do I weigh these options, right? They don't really understand which one it is. And so we kind of give them that thought process of like, this is how you should weigh it. And then 2 is also like, they think and they don't do, right? So you could be like, I have these 4 options. I don't know what to do with these. It's like, well, the 2 years it took you to kind of narrow it down, if you would have just did a project in each of these 4, and obviously it's harder to do certain projects. Like if you're trying to get in medicine, obviously that's pretty hard.
Yeah.
But if you have like these 4 options, is like, go do a project in each 4 of these and see which one you like the most. And like, you can do that in half the time. And you'll
100%.
figure out very quickly if this is the right thing that you want to do. So yeah.
I like that, man. I think you kind of embody this idea of like almost like practicing it more than just analyzing. And I feel like a lot of people are always just looking at, so there's just, it's just like, I guess in a way we live in a world where there are so many options that then in turn we're trying to pick the right option. And then because we are in that point of analysis paralysis, by the time we do pick an option, that option may have been right like a year ago, but at this point maybe it's not, right? Like
Yeah,
things are moving so fast. Even if you do wait a year to try to figure out if it was the right choice, by then it might be over. Like I literally met with a guy like 6 months ago who had this idea for an app. And I like gave him all the information, told him how we could move forward, whatever. And then today I just saw that somebody just raised 15 million for basically the exact same idea.
exactly.
And so
Okay.
maybe like 10 years ago, you had a year from the idea to inception where it's like, there's no way anyone's going to be able to get started on this. But there are so much money and so many ideas and so many people. You just do not have the time to be just literally sitting there waiting and like, I mean, is it, do I kind of, maybe, I don't know. So it's very cool to kind of hear you wanting to be purposeful and then, trying the different options. One thing I love about your Instagram is that you are constantly talking about your process of working and like trying to balance work-life balance, trying to, work on the weekdays and the weekends and things like that. And we talked about it a little bit before, but I think that it's really practical to really pay attention to those things because you can very easily burn yourself out. You can very easily just be working just to say that you're working, just trying to show that you're busy. How have you kind of gone through that practice and what is your practice right now? Kind of
Sure. So do you want like the full backstory or you want like the short Spark Notes version?
I mean, give us a full backstory. I think
Yeah. So I think for me, I think it was especially important. I think it depends on each person, but for me, it was especially important because I think the one thing I've always said is the people that are very successful in life, I think they're all masters of time in some way, shape, or form. Like they've mastered the art of maximizing how to get an hour. Like I always say, like the Elons and the Jeff Bezos and the Bill Gates of the world, they probably get more out of an hour than anyone else can get out of an hour. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like they can perform 10 more tasks, or maybe it's not about the number of tasks, but the size of the task or the impact of the task. They can get more done than most people. And if you can just think about doing that, if you take the unit of time of an hour and you apply that over their whole lifetime, obviously they're going to get more done. But one thing for me was like I have ADHD, right? So for me, that was always a huge kind of like thing for me to how can I focus my mind, right? Like the ADHD mind is a super unfocused mind that you generate a lot of ideas, you have a lot of thoughts, and that's great. And it's kind of a superpower in some instances because you're very creative because you generate more thoughts than most people. But if you don't focus those thoughts, then obviously you get pulled into 1,000 different directions.
Right.
And so luckily high school was easy enough for me in the sense of like I was naturally smart enough to kind of get through classes, right? Like I was smart enough to kind of figure things out and get through classes. But it really came to a crossroads in college, which was I was trying to do way too many things and I didn't know where to focus my attention. So I basically just got pulled in a bunch of different directions. So my first 2 years was really understanding what is my process and what do I want to do. And so that's when I started thinking about it's really important to kind of master your process. And like I'm a very spontaneous person, but now my life has changed from being like I don't plan anything to I plan everything, right? So to an extent, I plan, every Sunday I plan my full week. Once a month, I plan out any major events to make sure everything is squared away. But like pretty much from when I wake up to when I fall asleep, I have it planned to every single minute.
Hmm.
Because I think it's super important to be very deliberate with your actions and be very scheduled and time oriented to know if you give yourself unlimited time to complete a task, then you'll fill that time to fill complete that task. But it's very
Hmm.
important to kind of narrow your focus and understand those things. And I think it's also super important. I guess I'm kind of talking a lot of different things, so let's narrow it down. Let's talk about more about scheduling first, and then we'll talk about like breaks and stuff like that.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like time boxing and scheduling, I think is extremely important with
Hmm.
tasks and goals because if you don't really put a time limit on something, then you'll fill that time to complete those tasks. And then on
100%.
top of that, I think you also want to make sure that you are very deliberate with your time. I
Hmm.
think the ADHD mind and anyone regular mind as well is if you don't plan things out, then your brain will pull you into a bunch of different directions. Whatever seems to pop up in your head and give you the biggest signal is what you're going to chase. But it's super important that you say from this hour to this hour, I'm going to do this. And then the hour after that, I'm going to do this so that there is no time to really for your brain to get distracted by what's going on in your day. If you know you have to get these tasks done, then you need to make sure you get those tasks done and really be deliberate with those types of things and be very organized.
Yeah.
When it comes to like overarching like macro, when it comes to like macro scheduling, what's like how do you live your life and how do you plan your life? I think it's extremely important. I think a lot of people, I don't know, maybe it's an American thing, maybe it's a world thing, but America, they have this theory of like you can just work for like 1,000 hours straight and just like expect to like get the same returns. And that's just
Yeah.
like that makes no sense at all. It's like literally
No.
impossible. It's like
Uh-huh.
imagine going to the gym and lifting weights all day and expecting to be able to lift the same amount of weight like all day long. It's like
It's no job.
it's
Hmm.
impossible. Like it's literally impossible. So you can do two things. And I think with engineering they teach, like especially in manufacturing. I worked in manufacturing. You have to like one of the most important things is it's called planned maintenance, right?
Yeah.
So you can run a machine 24 hours a day, but they always schedule a time during the day, even if the machine doesn't break down or not. During the day, they schedule a time for the machine to provide maintenance, whether that's lubing the machine, fixing issues, anything. And they do it every single day, no matter what. Even though the machine's running at 100%, whether it's running at 60%, 0% efficiency, they do it every single day. And I think it's super important that you do that. You don't do things when things break because obviously if you wait for something to break, then you have to like stop the motion of everything. But
Hmm.
if you provide a continuous effort to, you know, maintain a machine and make sure that it's getting the proper maintenance, then it's going to last a lot longer and it's going to, the odds of it's breaking is not going to happen. So just imagine like the people whose cars they never take to the shop compared to the people that take their car to the shop on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to last a lot longer and it's not going to create as much inconvenience.
Right.
So instead of not planning for things to break, because everything breaks to some extent. So that's kind of what my theory was, right? It was at some point I'm going to need to sleep. I
Right.
know sleep is super important to me. If I don't get enough sleep, I know my brain function does not work.
Right.
And my job used to push me like, oh, I'm like, no, I know myself. Like, don't even try and push me. If you want what like the good effort out of it, you got to let
Right.
me do my shit. And so what I do is Monday through Friday, I work. My schedule pretty much goes. I wake up at like 6 a.m. I work
Uh-huh.
for 4 hours. I take a lunch break. That's usually 2 hours. I work out and I eat lunch. I work for another 4 hours. I eat dinner. Then I work for another 2 hours, and then I take a 2 hour break where I just relax either whether it's watching TV or I read or I play video games. But I make
Hmm.
sure to include that in every single day because at some point you have to decompose your brain.
Hmm.
And I mean not decompose, but like you need to rest your brain and really bring your brain back to like a regular level before you go to sleep. Otherwise, when you say you're gonna go to sleep, you're gonna be wasting time because you're not gonna be able to fall asleep. And so
Right.
making sure that I allot 8 hours a day to go get enough sleep because it's super important that whether you get 2 hours less of sleep, if you're operating at less efficiency
Hmm.
because of the last that you didn't give yourself the 2 extra hours, it's going to make
Hmm.
you run bad throughout that day. So,
Yeah.
and another thing that I accounted for as well in my day, I know I might be rambling a little bit, but one
No,
thing
I
that I
think
always account for. Oh, go ahead.
I said I think this is good. This is like really
Okay.
good.
Okay. The one thing that I always account for as well is I like to have a lot of fun. And I like to party a lot. I like to go out. I like to drink and I like to do all those things. And I know that I like to do those things. It's just like how I've been since college and maybe even
Yeah.
before college. I've always really liked to doing those things.
Yeah.
And so that was always kind of like if I work really hard, this is my reward to myself. I think it's really important to build a reward system in your own head, in the sense of
Mhm.
like, if I do X, then I get to reward myself with Y, and not reward yourself for just doing. Like,
Right.
I don't think it's wrong with rewarding yourself, but I think people reward themselves for things that are normal. Like,
Right.
going to work on a regular basis is a average day thing that everyone does. So rewarding yourself for just doing an average day work, you should definitely take a break, but like rewarding yourself, like, oh, I deserve this, is like, well, that's what everyone does. Like, you're not actually doing anything extra, right? Right? Like, when you do something extra, you should reward yourself extra. And so when
Right.
I work hard, right, I work like 80 hours a week pretty much. When I work 8 hours a week, I reward myself by giving myself a free day where I can do whatever I want. If I want to go rock climbing, I go rock climbing. If I want to hang out with my friends, I hang out with my friends. If I want to go out, I go out. But it's a reward for me working hard. And I think it's super important that you get to that point to really get yourself there. So, yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking to myself, like listening to you talk about working in the 80 hours a week. It's interesting when you're passionate and then actually paying attention to the time that you're spending, that you're able to do so much more. I remember when I first got like my first, this like specific journal that broke down my days from 4 a.m. until like midnight. And I started waking up at 4 a.m. and I was in bed by like 8 p.m. But like the amount of stuff I was able to get done with this 168 hours a week we have was astronomical. And I realized that you lose so much efficiency if you don't know where you're going next. Like at work, a lot of times, like I just be working on a task or whatever, and it's just like you just are almost floundering. And you get to the end of the day, I get to the end of the day, and I just was like, I don't know how I didn't get that much done. Like, how was this all I got done today? But then the second that like I knew, when I'm done with this task, we're moving here, I'm going to take a break at this time, I'm not looking at my phone at this time, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. All of a sudden, like I had time to read, I had time to work out, I had time to do everything. And so in a lot of ways, for a lot of people that like, Django, I just don't have enough time in the day, it's never not enough time. It's like it's a lack of preparation of how the time is being spent. And I could easily point to almost anyone on how they're wasting at least 4 to 6 hours a day minimum. Just
100%.
just like, and part of it is that it's like what you said, your brain can't actually flip the way that you think it does. So if you're in the middle of a work day and you have your phone on you and you get a notification and you take that minute and you're just looking at your phone and you're having a conversation, like you really do lose a large amount of efficiency just switching back and forth between your phone and then back to work, phone back to work, or sending a message or a Slack. So I've really worked hard on like having time frames where notifications are off, and like we are going to go to the grindstone on this piece, and this is what we're going to get done. And honestly, anyone can start a business at any time if they actually scheduled out the time outside of that work.
100%.
I love that. I also love that you take the time to just enjoy yourself. Like a lot of people in startup mode are just like, I'm going to grind myself into the ground. I'm going to work every moment of every day. And in all honesty, it's just like you said, your brain has to compartmentalize. Your brain has to take its rest and be efficient. You need to take time away, because sometimes that time away, I've had really great ideas because I combined work with like, wow, I'm out doing this thing. Like this is another thing that we could do. So it's definitely like kind of showing the value of taking the time to actually like break things out and really allow your brain the rest that it needs. Because I do think it is a little bit of an American thing with the whole like you can just grind into eternity, and it's
It makes
just
no sense. It's like it's not hot. It's like physically not. My old boss used to just be that person. He just was like you just keep going, and it's like, dude, like you can't do that,
no.
right? Like, it's the people that are like, yeah, like I work 100 hours or 7 days, and it's like, honestly, that's like, if you need to work that much and you're getting that much done, then you're not doing something right. Like, there's
Right.
people out there that's doing half the amount of work and getting 3x what you're getting out of the day. So like, that means you're just wasting time. You're just blowing time. Like, you're not even using time wisely. It's just like you're just telling people how much you're working to tell you
Yeah.
like I make sure to take up to like, if you can't get the task done in a certain amount of time, that means you're not doing something as efficiently as possible or as smart as you possibly can. Like,
Hmm.
I think a lot of things people will do is they don't, and this is why I always plan my weeks, is people spend a lot of time figuring out what they need to do, right?
Yeah.
You should be spending that time. Like when you say you're going to set out to do a task, you
Uh-huh.
should know what needs to get done, right? Because that means you're wasting time figuring out what needs to get done. And then by the time you figure those things out, now it's like, let's get started. Now let's get,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, if you're not planning your day before, at least the day before, like I do it a week before just because it makes it a lot easier for me because I have to schedule calls with people.
Yeah.
But if you're not at least spending the night before you go and get your day going, plan your day before, then you're
Mm-hmm.
wasting a huge amount of time because you're waking up, you have no idea what you're going to do today. So your
Mm-hmm.
brain's not even your brain's not even knowing what you're not waking up knowing exactly what you need to get done. So your
Mm-hmm.
brain's like, okay, what are we going to do today? What do I need to get done? Because you have no urgency, right? So you can get on your phone because you're not worried about like, oh, I don't have anything to actually do. And it's like, yes, you do have things to do. Your
Yeah.
brain just doesn't know because you haven't planned them out. So you wake up, you get on your phone, you waste an hour on your phone, you look on Instagram, you spend an hour on Instagram, you do all
Yeah.
these things, and then you're like, okay, time to get my day started. But it's like if you know that you have X, Y, and Z things to get done today,
Yeah.
then your brain's already gonna be like, you can only spend 15 minutes on your phone because you know you have to spend an hour to get the next thing done, and you have an hour to get the next thing done, and you need an hour to do the next thing. And so now you're on top of yourself because you have a plan, you know what you need to do. And I always say, maybe there might be a couple other things, but the two things that I think are like maybe three things that I think will make you successful.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency, I
Yeah.
think, which is like one of the hardest things to build, but I think it's one of the most powerful tools.
For
It's
sure.
also one of the most dangerous weapons as well. Because consistency can go both ways. You can be consistently doing something good, or you can be consistently doing something bad, and
Yeah.
that builds over time, right? Like I think that's one of the things that people, it goes both ways, right? Like if you do something consistently, it adds up like an investment, right? Like if you invest
Right.
money, it's going to build over time. But same thing
Right.
is like if you sit in a chair wrong and you've been sitting in a chair wrong your whole life and you're like, why is my back hurt? It's
Right.
probably what it is, right? So I think it's super important to be consistent. Second thing is focus. I think a lot of people think working really hard, working hard is super important, super duper important. But if you're working really hard at 1,000 different things, then you have no depth in any direction. If you look
Right.
at the really successful people, they don't have four jobs. Elon Musk might be a CEO of two companies, but they don't have four jobs. They have one job. They do one thing.
Right.
And I
Right.
think focus is one of the most important things that you can develop over time is you need to focus in one direction and do one thing before you move on to anything else. Because otherwise, if you do three, four things, there's someone out there that you're competing against that does that one thing, and he's going to beat you or she is going to beat you at whatever you're trying to compete against because they're doing one thing. There's 24 hours in a day, and if they're spending their 24 hours doing that one thing, and you
Yeah.
have your day cut up in three things, then that's just not possible to beat them.
Fact.
And the last thing I think is like scheduling. I think scheduling is super important. If you don't set goals and like tell yourself like deadlines and stuff, then
Mm-hmm.
you have the rest of your life to do whatever you want to do. And I think it's important that you set deadlines and stuff. So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, look, they've recently been doing studies kind of finding that sleep actually helps you compartmentalize all of the data that's going on in the day. And so people who aren't getting enough sleep aren't actually kind of almost like filing away the day in the way that they need to. And think about it, if part of your day is also spent preparing for tomorrow, then that also means that your brain is preparing for tomorrow, knowing what the process is going to be. So in a lot of ways, that's just setting you up for success. And at the end of the day, I heard this the other day, people who are great do the good things consistently. And so just
100%.
consistent every day. I'm with you 100% on that to the ends of the earth. The little things that I've done day after day have been the things that have definitely translated to me being where I am now more than anything else, because it was the emails that I sent when I didn't feel like sending them. It was the books that I read, the 10 pages that I got in, the exercising every day so I stayed healthy. Like all those little things, nobody ever sees that, but that's the thing at the end of the day that has helped me get to where I am right now. So for you and like your future, as you're kind of working towards this process, I feel like I hear from people all the time, Django, I want to be a successful entrepreneur. I want to be like you. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to have a lot of money. And the thing I've been telling people is in response to that is like, why? Because at the end of the day, you could be successful doing anything, but why entrepreneurship? Because the chips are stacked. I mean, at the end of the day, the majority of people do not have success in entrepreneurship. And so what I've been trying to push people is to find their why. And I feel like with our breadcrumbs, you've really found a why that matters to you. What would you say to people who are, kind of
Yeah.
reaching out and want to be successful entrepreneurs? How,
I
how do you
think
kind of get to that?
I 100% agree. I think one thing that I By no means am I like this, like, do I know everything or an expert
Yeah.
about entrepreneurship? But I know the one thing that has like the days where I don't want to do anything, the one thing that keeps me going is the reason, like the grand vision that I have, right? And the
Yeah.
grand vision that I really have is that, at some point underprivileged kids in the world that don't have the environment around them to learn about what's in the like what things they can do in the world.
Yeah.
We're the website that people go to. We're the business that people refer to, which is like, hey, I want to learn more about what a software engineer is. I don't know anyone in my family or
Hmm.
anyone at the school that teaches or anyone around me as a software engineer, but I
Hmm.
would love to learn more about it. Or if they might not even know what a software engineer is at all, but we can
Hmm.
still suggest something to them that they might not know exists. I think that stops a lot of people from being successful because they just don't know things exist. And so
Right.
that's like really what drives me is like being able to like there's things that, I grew up pretty privileged. And I grew up in a very like had the money, went to private school my whole life, parents paid for college, the whole nine.
Hmm.
And so I was very lucky and fortunate. And even then, after I graduated college, there's like careers I was learning about that I was like, if I knew that would have existed, I would have done that. Like
Yeah.
that sounds so much more interesting
Yeah.
and like sounds amazing. But I just didn't know it exists. Like I just didn't, and like that's why it took me a while to get there. Jesus.
The storm
Um,
is
yeah,
that's
it's
a real
wild.
jeez, bro.
It doesn't storm like this in LA.
I know. That's what I was
Um,
gonna say. Like, aren't you? I was like, aren't you in LA? That's a
no, I'm in Baltimore right now. And so the big why I think is extremely important, right? Like there's a millions of ways to make money out there. There's so many ways to make money. There's, if you're creative and you work hard, like you can find ways to make money no matter what.
Mhm.
Um, and if that's your goal, then you should go do those things. But the thing that's really going to allow you to do the things that are really, really hard is you have to have a true passion and desire. And that's why when people are like, oh, I just, I want to start a business, they're like, oh, I can make money doing this. And it's like, but does that sound fun to you? Like, does that sound like you would want to do for 5, 10 years of your life? Like,
Right.
like, do you want to do that? Does that even sound enjoyable? Like, oh, that sounds like I could do that. And it's like, yeah, you can, but do you want to? Because like want is all that really
Right.
matters. Because like end
Right.
of the day, when you're, up 8 at 9 o'clock and someone's calling you from the customer service desk to ask you questions, are you gonna feel passionate about actually answering their question? Right? Like
Hmm.
people text me, people call me at random times of the day to ask me questions. And it's like, even on a bad day, I feel like I want to answer their questions. But
Yeah.
if you're doing something that you can do, but you don't like it, you don't enjoy it, why would you answer their call? Why would you
Right.
pick up the phone? Why would you put like, why would you do these extra things? Like, do you genuinely care about doing what you want to do? Because if you don't,
Hmm.
it's going to be very, very hard to create a business out of it.
Right.
And I think that people should probably focus on that a little bit more about the why, right? Why do you want to do it? And for me, I felt the pain myself and understood to what it was like to really, not know what I wanted to do. And I was very privileged. And I was like, if I think about the kid that grew up, poor, maybe has one parent, didn't get to
Hmm.
go to college, didn't do well in school. No one's ever told them that they were smart. No one ever
Hmm.
believed in them. How hard it would be for them to go, chase their dreams. It's really hard. No one's ever believed in you. And so I
Yeah.
really wanted to build a system that really provides for the people that are forgotten in this world because they're told as a kid they're not smart. Their parents don't know what is the best for them. Their environment is not conducive for them. There's
Hmm.
so many things that work against you. And I want to make sure that we are the good that drives you, that makes you feel confident in yourself, makes you feel you can do something, shows you how to actually do it and what is the best option to do it. Because if no one's there to teach you, how do you figure it out? How do you know it
Yeah.
exists? And so I think it's really important that you understand the why behind your actions and why you want to do something. Money, in my opinion, I understand like for the people, I grew up with money. And so obviously for me, money is not important, but like it has to be stronger than just money because there's so many. And the thing is, even if your goal is just money, there's so many ways to make money. And if your goal is just money, well, as soon as you see another opportunity that pays you more money, that's going to look more
Yeah.
interesting.
Facts.
So you're going to be getting a job and you're like, yo, this job pays me this much money. And then someone's gonna be like, yo, I make 2 to X what you're doing. Shit, I should have did that. And then you're going to try and chase that. And then by not creating any type of mastery of anything besides just like, I want money, you're not actually going to get there because like the way I always think about it, I don't know if this is the best example, but if your whole
Yeah.
goal is money and you're thinking about taking a job or starting a business, if you make $0.00 starting a business and you make zero money for 10 years, and then you sell that business for like $10 million, I don't know, $10-20 million. I don't know what your cut is, whatever, but you can make $1 million out of that versus you can work a job that pays you a safe salary. If you make $100,000, right, which is a good salary, right? If you make $100,000 over 10 years, so that's like what, $1 million.
Yeah, it's
You're better off
well,
making $0.00 and just selling something that's really valuable, right? So like, if your whole goal is money, to like really macro size it out, and is it actually going to get you where you want to go? And
yeah,
it's all about the why. If you
yeah,
figure out what the why is and why you want to do something, and get really good at it and be better than anyone else in the world, you will make money. Just
yeah.
simple as that. The
And
greatest
I
clown
mean,
in the world is probably a millionaire. That's all I always say. The greatest clown in the world is probably a millionaire.
the,
So,
well,
yeah.
the funny thing about the money is if the goal is the money, that's when you hear from a lot of these celebrities and people that they work so hard to get to a point, and then it wasn't worth it. And so then you hear people who don't have money saying, "Well, it's easy to say that once you have money," but what their misunderstanding is, once you hit a goal, to some extent, it becomes normal. It becomes a new normal for you. Like, I think
100%.
back on, at one point, I drove an Acura Legend, and now I drive a Tesla. I really can't remember what the feeling was like being in the Acura Legend and wanting to be in my Tesla, but I do remember why I wanted a Tesla more than I wanted any car, and I had a why to why that car had to be the one. And so every day I love getting in that car because I set a very, very firm why at the beginning of when I was saying, what is the car that I want at the end of the day? And I remember that every day, but I can't remember what it was like way back. And
No.
you hear that with music all the time, like rappers or country. It's like, I miss the days back when I was there because it felt like I was trying to get somewhere. Once
Yeah.
you have enough money, it's like, well, that's it. Like, what else is there even to life?
Yeah.
If that's the whole point to your life, well, then you'll get there. And then, like, you still have to live. Like,
Yeah.
you hear people say it all the time about retirement. Like, it's like, what do you want? It's like, I just want to drink margs on the beach. And I remember the first time I heard someone say, like, how many margs? Like,
That's a good question.
how many? Like, okay, so like, let's say tomorrow you could retire, margs on the beach. You don't need money to do it. I'm going to give you a beach house, margs. Okay, cool. Like, you're going to do that for 5 years. You're going to do that for 10 years. You're going to do it for 20 years. And the thing is we don't really like think about that idea that well. We're only just like kind of throwing hypotheticals. It's like, how many marks you're going to like kind of wear away at some point, because like you can only
100%.
drink so many. You're going to, how many hangovers, how many times are you going to wake up after all those margs and then drink more margs forever? It's just not, it's not conducive. So you do have to find something else to life. Otherwise, you're going to get the thing that you wanted, and then you're going to find out, oh, well, turns out I still have to live. So it's definitely, I think that's amazing what you guys are doing. And I think it's really going to make really great change in the world for people as they're just trying to just figure out what they want to do with their life, and finding that process. For you, if you could turn back the hands of time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what is something that you would tell yourself?
I think that's a really good question. One, probably, well, there's a couple things. I think there's different categories. I think there's different categories in each part of my life.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's different categories. So like education wise, I probably would have taught myself how to program, because I don't know how to program, but I wish one thing I really wish I knew how to do was program.
Yeah.
So education wise, programming, maybe probably pick a different major, because I studied chemical engineering, which I enjoyed, but I wish I would have like studied like computer science, kind of the same field. Socially, I don't know. I feel like I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like chasing women would probably be something that I probably wouldn't spend as much time on. To be honest, I feel like I was so obsessed with like, not obsessed, but like
I know how it
that was
goes.
like a big like thing in my mind that I really, really wanted
Yeah.
in my mind. And because also I went to all boys schools, that's probably why.
Oh yeah, that's just about
But that was something that I think that was super important. I think instead of being so focused on like, because I guess the big way that my mind works is like, if you work harder, you will get kind of what you like. If there's something that I want, I'm gonna just work harder until I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that is like the same way with like relationships, whether it's a friendship, whether it's like romantic relationship, it's whatever. It's like there has to be some kind of actual connection. You can't just like force things.
Mhm.
And I think that was the one thing that I would really learn. I think when it comes to like, even when it comes to like certain business things, you can't really force things because in some instances you have to create a relationship with the whoever other business it is or whatever. You can't really force it. And I think in life, I think that was something that I'd probably change. I guess other things, I'd probably start a business.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and at least have like one failure under my belt in the sense of just like start something that I thought would be really cool and then didn't pan out and then just kind of move on from there and just be like, oh, well, I tried.
Feel that.
Um, let's see
Those
what
are
else.
those are solid. I mean, that's a you
I
really have
don't
that
have
kind of.
too many crazy regrets though, because I think I've always, I don't know, as a very young child, I was, I think maybe it's the way my parents raised me. I very much was always very focused on if I died right now, would I be happy with what I lived or like what I've done?
Mhm.
And I would say I've always kind of lived that was always a big motto in my life. And I would say that even right now, like if I died right now, I'd be satisfied.
Yeah.
I think this would be the first time in my life where I'd be actually like pretty like upset because I have something that now that I want to see kind of become to
Yeah.
fruition kind of whereas like I really want to make this business become a thing.
Yeah.
So that'd be the first thing this is the first time I really would have that because in the past I was like if I died, I feel like I've accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish up
That's
until
good.
this age. But that would be the first big couple things. I think there's a time and a place for all those different things, and yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel that. What is your best tip for making the world a better place?
Oh shit. Damn, that's a good question. I have no idea. Best tip. I think being empathetic
Yeah.
and really understanding what other people go through, and then also I guess oh, I actually have two things. One, and just like the personal sense of like your own brain,
Mhm.
is be more introspective and understand what other people are going through before you really judge them
Mhm.
or really understand that. And I think attached to that point is better root cause analysis. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people don't really understand the root cause of things, and so
Mhm.
they think it's a lot easily solved. But to make really, I think your question was how to make the world a better place. I would say empathy and root cause analysis. I think they're the two big things about how to change the world. Just because I think when you first start really being like an entrepreneur and a problem solver, I think the big thing is a lot of people try and fix symptoms and they don't
Mhm.
actually fix the actual root cause of the problem. So I think really understanding people's pain and understanding what they're actually under like feeling and like what they're really going
Mhm.
through, and then really diving down and being thinking critically about what is the real root cause of that source of pain and what is actually causing that. I think I had a discussion the other day that was talking a lot about should we allocate more money to like the police? That was a big thing, a big discussion. And I don't think the police really actually solve things, right? Like they
Mhm.
are there to hold people accountable and those different
Mhm.
types of things, but it doesn't proactively fix anything, right? Like you're
Mhm.
not teaching anyone, but the police don't teach anyone anything. They're not in
Mhm.
the schools. They're not coaching people. Like they're not doing those things. They just hold people accountable. And so if you really think about the root cause of what is the problem or how do you solve that root cause or the root fix the problem is if you provide like people don't commit crimes unless there's a some people do, but most crimes are not created unless you like people need something. Either they're robbing
Mhm.
people because they need money or they're uneducated because their systems are not strong enough. So I think it's really important that you understand what is the root cause of why people are doing certain things,
Mhm.
um, and really solving that problem, the root cause of the problem, which is a lot of poor people do things because they lack the money. So if you give people an opportunity to make good money, then they'll do that. And yeah, stuff like that. Does
Yeah.
that answer your question though?
Yeah, it does. I mean, at the end of the day, I think as a culture, we're very solipsistic, very focused in our own heads of what we think is the case on things. And I think that point that you're making about being more empathetic and trying to dive into the root cause instead of just finding a correlation that further proves what I believe is the truth will enable you to kind of change the way that people kind of view things because correlation isn't always causation. And with so many data points in the world, you can literally correlate almost anything. So it's
100%.
why we constantly have problems where one group's using this data point to say here's the correlation for causation, another group saying correlation for causation, and really the only thing you care about is that in your head you think you have the
It
answer
makes
instead
sense.
of actually being
100%.
empathetic. And so I'm with you 100% on that. I'm really thankful to have the podcast, man. I feel like you gave just endless gems of just really to help people as they're on their own journey. I mean, the whole point of the Django Show for me is, you know, when I started on the journey, I honestly was very money focused. I wanted to kind of be my own boss and things, but I didn't realize that it needed to be something bigger than myself. And I think you not only gave a lot of gems in regard to the process of finding a why and how your company is even helping people with that, but also how can you become even more efficient with your time and just become a better version of yourself. I really feel like people are going to get a lot of good out of this. So I'd love for you to be able to tell people, you know, how they can connect with you, what is maybe you're looking for in your own startup. Maybe you might end up connecting with somebody. I mean, I want to give the floor to you before we leave.
Oh, I appreciate it. So easiest way probably to connect to us is you can reach out. I think I tagged it right below. So you can just go to our website, ourbreadcrumbs.co, and sign up
Mm-hmm.
there. If you want to reach out to me, our Instagram is at ourbreadcrumbs, which is basically the same thing right here. I think that's probably the easiest way. Or you can reach out to me on email, which is frankie@ourbreadcrumbs.co. So one way or another, that's all around those things. So I'm sure you can reach out to me, or if you really want to get in connect with me, reach out to Django. But we're definitely moving in the right direction, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but hopefully in 2-3 years you'll see us on the news or something like that, or in an article or something like that. That's the game plan. It's just going to take a little bit more time than people. I think that's another thing. Things take a lot of time, and if you really want to be serious about something big, it takes a lot of time, and you don't get the glory. The glory is the symptom of doing something really well. So yeah.
Man, I love that, dude. Well, I mean, thank you so much for being on. I know we had some technical difficulties earlier with myself, but we figured it out. So, I mean, thank you so much for being on, man. This is episode 6 of the Django Show. Thank you guys for being a part, and look forward to the next episode.